Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Water Wednesday, August the 26th. I'm Dr. Tiffany Boyd-Hodgson. I do these broadcasts every Wednesday. The purpose of the broadcast is to talk to you about water, about science, about the Vallecitos Water Board, and about me. And why would you want to know about me? Because I am actually running for office. I'm running for the Vallecitos Water Board Division 5. If you have joined me before, you know what I usually do at the beginning is I give a little introduction about myself and about the race and about the Vallecitos Water Board. Then I show a block of content, and then we take questions from the public. Tonight, I have a special guest. I'm really thrilled to have her here. She's Dr. Kathleen Tracita from the University of California at Irvine, and I will introduce her more formally in just a couple of minutes. But first, I am going to share my screen and go through a couple of points that I've made several times during these broadcasts to acclimate you to the race, to me as a candidate, and give you some information in case you want to ask questions. So let me share my screen. One moment. Okay, let's see. There we go. So tonight, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Kathleen Tracita. She's going to be talking to us about healthy soil and the connection between soil and water. And we're going to learn more about that. It's going to be an interesting talk. But first, a few weeks ago, I held a Water Wednesday, and I featured a broadcast by a Shinnecock woman named Kelsey T. Leonard. And I was really inspired by that TED Talk that I shared with you that she gave. And one of the takeaways was reconnecting with the land that we are on, reconnecting with the water. So what I had committed to doing after that is to provide a land acknowledgement each time I do this, because I think that's really important. I think it's an important step to acknowledge the history of the people that came before us here, and a connection to the water. I think it's also an important sort of level set so that we can set our intention for this conversation that we're going to have. So I'm just going to read it. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory and homelands of the Luiseno Payam people. Cal State University San Marcos, which is where Division 5 is and near my home, and surrounding areas are still home to the 6 federally recognized bands of the La Jolla, Pala, Palma, Pachanga, Rincon, Soboba, Luiseno, Payam people. It is also important to acknowledge that this land remains the shared space among the Kupanga-Wisham and the Kupeño and Kumeyaay and Ipe peoples. We acknowledge that we are guests on traditional, unceded Luiseno Payam land. So first, I'd like to talk about some endorsements. Last night, I received the endorsement of the San Diego Democratic Party, and I'm really proud of that. This is a nonpartisan race, and the issues that I'm talking about are nonpartisan. And there are folks that aren't Democrats that are going to vote for me. There are folks that aren't Democrats that have endorsed me too. But I'm a proud Democrat. I espouse democratic values, and I wanted to let you know that I got the endorsement last night. The Sierra Club has also endorsed me, which I am also very, very proud of. They have chosen me as the candidate in this race to endorse. Thirdly, I'm a scientist and I'm a mom, as I have said many times, and I have earned the endorsement of a group called 314action.org. What they do is they endorse scientists who are running for office, and so I have earned that endorsement as well, and I'm very proud of those, and I wanted to share them with you. So a little bit about me. These are the pillars or the platforms that I'm running on as in my hope to become the person that you elect to the Vallecitos Water Board. And a lot of people, as I'm talking to voters, and I'm starting to talk to voters a lot now, I've sort of transitioned between pulling the campaign together and developing the infrastructure, and now we're going out into the world and we're talking to voters. And we're finding that there's really kind of a lack of understanding of the way that the Vallecitos Water Board works, and that it's even governed by a board of directors. So that's one of the points that I'm hoping to make. Every time I do this broadcast, I want to make sure that people understand that. The Vallecitos Water Board is governed by a board of directors. That board of directors, those folks are elected by you and me. So a vote for me is a vote for the following: affordable, quality, reliable water for you that puts your interests first. I am not taking developer money, and I will vote down any developer subsidies in our water. Currently, about 15% of our water bill subsidizes development. One of the other things that I would like to do is partner with local schools and the trades, schools like high schools and Palomar College, to try to bring a water operator training program to those schools so that we create a pipeline for people to train at those jobs, then come to work at the district. That's a good way to provide good local jobs and get our economy going and keep it going. It's expensive to live up here, and we need good jobs so that people that have lived here their whole lives, if they want to stay here, they can. They can stay here, buy a house, raise a family, and have a good job to support their family. Finally, I will commit to you that I will use science to make decisions, not special interests. Special interests are rampant in our board of directors right now. Developer interests, and I'm a scientist. I believe that we should look at evidence, and we should think critically and creatively about the challenges that we're going to face as we move towards a world that is more impacted by climate change. If you have been to one of these before, you've seen this map before, but if you haven't, just to level set us all, Division 5 is mostly contained within San Marcos. There's a handful of folks that have addresses, and their mailing address is Escondido. And this is a map of the district right here. This is District 5. I've added some landmarks. For example, Double Peak Park is here. Twin Valley Oaks Road is right here. It's one of the boundaries. Cal State University San Marcos is here. It's just outside of the district, but it's nearby. It's a big employer. It's a big center of a lot of people, so that can help you get your bearings here. I-15 is over here. Escondido is off that way. 78 is up here. San Marcos High School is this structure right here. Lake San Marcos is here. Carlsbad is this direction. I am running for Division 5. It's mostly contained within San Marcos. So as I mentioned a few weeks ago, I showed the TED Talk by Kelsey T. Leonard, and she challenged us at the end of that to think about, what have I done for the water today? She challenged us to reconnect with water, and she said that water is life. So I want to leave that with you every time we come together and we chat, because the more we think about water and the more we change the way that we think about water, the more it's top of mind, the more we think about how much water we use every day, whether we turn off the faucet when we brush our teeth. My kids are still trying to learn that. The little things that we can do to help preserve our water. It's a finite supply. We do not have unlimited water. And especially here in Southern California, we are feeling that pinch. We import all of our water, or we get it from the ocean. And so we have to figure out a way to make those supplies sustainable. Finally, are you struggling with your water bill? The Vallecitos Water Board has the district has a program called the Special Case Program. If you are suffering financial hardship, and we know that, as I've said in the past, 1 in 5 San Diegans has a water bill that exceeds 4% of their income, and that is the threshold for what is considered unaffordable. If you are in particular in low-income areas, 62% of those people have a water bill that exceeds 12%. So 3 times the threshold of affordability. So if that is you, please reach out to the Water Board. They have a program that may be able to help. You will probably be asked to provide documentation that the hardship has been created by COVID-19. Maybe you've lost your job, or maybe you don't have your business is significantly reduced because of COVID-19, or maybe you've been sick. Reach out to them. The phone number is at the bottom, 760-744-0460. Ask for customer service, ask for the special case program. Please bear in mind that the person who is taking your call is not the decision maker into whether or not you get help. But water rates have gone up, and they will continue to go up because, in part, we're subsidizing development, and people are suffering right now. So I encourage you to please reach out to them. Please be kind to the person you speak with on the phone, and talk to them about your struggles. Finally, this is the slide that I usually have at the end, but I'm going to have it now. We're talking to a lot of voters. We are doing something called a street and greet, and we're bringing those to different neighborhoods where we invite about 100 people. We usually have a pretty good turnout. If you would like to have one of those in your neighborhood, maybe you have a long driveway that we can set up and we can socially distance, and we require people to wear masks. But we, myself and someone who's running for school board named Sarah Ahmad, we have been going neighborhood to neighborhood, and we've got a bunch of them booked in the very near future, but we can add more. We can squeeze you in, and we would love to talk to you. This is a great way to talk to voters because we can't knock doors. People don't want us showing up on their doorstep. So this is a creative way that we are trying to hear people's concerns, hear the concerns of the community, and it's working really well. If you would like to host one, please get in touch with me. You can email me. You can at me on Twitter or Facebook, or even Instagram, and you can go to my website and contact me that way too. Finally, I am not taking developer money. I have now over 205 unique donors, and I'm really excited about that because those people have said, you're a good candidate, I support you, I support your vision for the Water Board and your advocacy for the people. So if that's you, if you can chip in $5, $10, I would really appreciate it. For example, this streaming platform that we use tonight, that costs money. It's a monthly charge. Printing postcards that we're writing to people, printing literature pieces, that all costs money, and it costs a lot of money, a surprising amount of money. So please chip in if you can. Finally, it is my pleasure to welcome my fellow Emerge California sister, Dr. Kathleen Tracita. She is a professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at the School of Biological Sciences at UC Irvine. She is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. She is also a fellow of the American Academy of Microbiology. She earned her PhD from Stanford University in 1999 in biological sciences. And I'm so grateful that she's here, and I can't wait to see her presentation and learn a lot. She is a soil expert, and she's going to talk about the intersection of soil and water. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, and now I will turn it over to Dr. Treseder. Thank you so much for joining.
Of course, yeah, I'm happy to do it. And thank you so much, Tiffany, for inviting me to talk. I'm very, very supportive of Tiffany's campaign. She and I went through candidate training together, and Tiffany was always the one who had her act together, who knew what she was doing. She's the most organized of all of us. And one of the things I learned about her is that she really walks the walk. So she lives her values, and she spent a lot of time doing science. She's been dedicated to the environment for years, stood up for LGBTQ rights for years. So all these things that she's talking to you about what she wants to do when she gets into office, she will actually do. Like, she means that. And it's wonderful to have someone like her running. And I also want to say that, you know, these local races, like water district, are so important. And I have to say, like 3 years ago, I didn't know really that there was also a water district director or board. but they're the ones who most directly affect your resources, like your water and your environment. The president is not drinking the water in your district, and our senators are not drinking the water in your district. Tiffany is drinking the water in your district, and her family is. And she knows what's best for your community when she's making these decisions. And the decisions she makes will the next day have an influence on your water. So I'm so glad that she's really bringing these educational opportunities to everybody. Okay, so I'm going to talk today about soils and why we should care about soils. And let me share the screen. Let's see. Share screen application window. Okay, and okay, is that working?
Yes.
Okay, great, excellent. Okay, so I think not many people think about soils a whole lot day to day, but I do. I love them. And I hope that by the end of my presentation, you'll understand why they are so important in general, and then also why it is so important to make sure that our soils are healthy in order to have clean drinking water and clean coastal waters. So I live up in Irvine, and I live near the Newport Bay. And like your area, since we live right by the coast, we really value these coastal areas. And you can see here, this is a picture of our upper bay. And you can see the water here, but also there's a number of homes along the bay. And, people really value these coastal areas for their property values, of course, but also for recreation. Like my family goes to the beach just about every weekend. And the water that we play in off the beach has runoff from the inland districts going into the ocean. And so we're actually playing in that water that is running off through our soils. We also have fisheries. So a lot of the fish that we eat are coming right from the areas around here, also affected by the water that runs off from our districts. Right now, this is all connected. So if you look at the homes and the buildings here up along the cliffs along this bay, these areas, they're putting fertilizer on their lawn, pesticides, herbicides, and other things. They're washing their cars, washing that soap down onto the ground. And a lot of that water does end up in the ocean, but first it goes through the soil, right? The soil is the first thing that actually treats it. And so the soil has a big effect on what sort of contaminants end up in that water. Okay, and that's true anywhere, regardless of whether you're near an ocean or not. Now, in our coastal areas, we also care, in addition to everything that they offer to people. I don't know whether you know this, but the coast of California is one of the most biodiverse places in the world. Right? We have thousands of plant species that live along this coast. We're actually approaching the biodiversity that you see in a rainforest. And we also have a lot of birds in our coastal areas and the wetlands near them. We have hundreds of species of birds that migrate in from around the world. Right? So we're sharing all these resources with many, many different stakeholders. And they're all interconnected. All right, and the soils are really important players here. All right, now, Tiffany was saying water is life, and I completely agree. And also soil is life. I don't know about any of you, but when quarantine started, I started my own sourdough starter. And I've never been a baker before, but I have all the time in the world now. And so I decided to do this in my house. And I have the sourdough starter, and it's almost like a pet to me. Like I think of it as a living thing. And it is living. Like you put the sugar in, the flour, and you can watch it breathe. You can watch it make those bubbles. You can see what it does to the flour. It's a living thing. Right? Soil is living in the same way, right? Actually, a lot of those microbes that are in our sourdough starters are also in the soil, and they're doing very similar things, right? They get sugars, they get plant material like flour, and they use it and they breathe out. Right? So not only are they an important place for plants to live, but they have their own life. Okay. And they're really, really diverse too. So in just a handful of soil, we will get thousands of species living in that soil. Right? Incredibly diverse places. Right? Now, I wish if I had a superpower, any superpower in the world, I would pick the ability to see underground and really highly, with really high magnification, because I've always wanted to be able to see what is happening right down in the minutiae of the soil. But I don't have that ability. So I'm going to try to describe to you what I imagine when I'm looking at the soil, what sort of things I'm picturing that I know are in there. Okay, first of all, there's a lot of insects in the soil, and these are some of the bigger ones, you know, ants. We also have earthworms. We have tiny, tiny little insects you can barely see called springtails and other things like that. Now, insects and other animals like this, I think of as the engineers of the soil. So they'll tunnel through the soil, they'll make kind of bigger structures, they'll shred dead wood, they'll shred leaves. They really just move it all around. And then we also have bacteria. And bacteria I think of as the recyclers in the soil. So the bacteria, you know, they're doing their own thing, they're living their lives, but as a byproduct of what they do, they recycle nutrients. As nutrients are used by other organisms and discarded because they can't be used anymore by them, the bacteria will take them up and transform them and release them, and they'll be back into a form that those other organisms can use again. Right? And this happens over and over and over. And without this, we wouldn't have life on Earth anymore. Right? So they're important recyclers. And we also have fungi. And fungi are my favorite. They're what I study. I love them. Fungi I think of as the web of the soil. They grow all throughout the soil and hold it together and connect it. Right. Now, here are some mushrooms of fungi. And, you know, I'm sure we've all seen mushrooms growing. I really enjoy seeing them. One of the things I always like to remember is that they're actually only a very small part of the fungus. They're the reproductive structures of the fungus. So like the apple in an apple tree, right? The actual most of the fungus is in the ground, in the soil. You can't see it, but it's there. And it's what made these mushrooms to reproduce. And altogether, these, you know, all these different species that live in the soil provide services. They happen to provide services that we value very much as we go about our lives. Right? This includes purifying the soil, right? And doing things that, you know, help plants and animals and people stay healthy. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about some of these services. And one of the types of soil species that is best, that performs the most of these services that we care about, they're called mycorrhizal fungi. Okay, mycorrhizal fungi. That's a pretty obscure term, so I'm going to define it for you. It actually comes from the words for fungus and root. So myco means fungus, rhizo means root. And it's basically a fungus that lives on a root. And here, I'll show you. This is a picture of a few pine seedlings. They are living together with a mycorrhizal fungus. And just to describe what's going on in this picture, all the material here that's masked, see it's covered with the red lines, these are the roots of this pine seedling. And everything else that you see here that's not covered by the red lines is the fungus, is the mycorrhizal fungus that's growing on this plant. Now, the amazing thing is that almost every plant that you see, that you've seen in your life, has these mycorrhizal fungi living on them, right? Includes when you're out going for a hike, when you're in your garden, even your house plants, they have these fungi. And they're not bad at all. In fact, they're really good for the plants, and most plants cannot live without them. Right? What these fungi do is they grow through the soil until they find a plant root, and then they either wrap themselves around the root or they actually grow inside the root, and they live there. And the parts that they have here, these sort of web-like things called hyphae, they grow out through the soil and they mine the soil for nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus and all the things that the plants need. They'll take the nutrients out of the soil, pass it along to the plants, give it to the plants. And so it's basically like they're fertilizing those plants. Plants grow a lot better. Now, the fungus doesn't do this for free. Okay, in exchange, the plant has to pay the fungus, and it pays the fungus by feeding it. And it feeds it sugar. And with that sugar, the fungus grows pretty well, as you can see. And in a way, they're very similar to us feeding our sourdough starters. We give the sourdough starters sugar, and the plants give their mycorrhizal fungi sugar, right, to help us out. Okay, so these mycorrhizal fungi, as they're forming these relationships with the plants and growing on the roots and growing through the soil, they're doing a number of things that are really important. And many of the things they do help keep our water clean, keep our groundwater clean, keep our runoff clean, keep our ocean water clean. And I'll tell you how. One of the ways is that these mycorrhizal fungi prevent soil erosion. Okay. So if you see streams or groundwater or ocean water that's all silty and brown, that's because soil particles have washed out of the soil into the water. Right? That is normally not what we want for our drinking water and recreation. These mycorrhizal fungi, as they grow through the soil, what they do is it's like they capture these soil particles in this net, and it keeps them from washing away through the water. Okay, so I'm going to explain what this photo is. So this photo is of two plant roots you can see here. They're the column-like structures here that go vertically through the photo. And then you see all these like really fine, sort of silky web-like things. Those are the mycorrhizal fungi that are growing out of the root and into the soil. That cute little bug there, that is a springtail. And so it's actually eating the fungi. Okay, so if you look here, you know, these sort of brown spots here, those are soil particles. And you can see here that they formed clumps. That's because these fungi are clumping them together. And then you can also see all those little web-like hyphae growing right through those particles and holding them right in place. They're fixed in place. And this makes a huge difference for the structure of the soil. It keeps that soil from washing away. And we don't want it in our water anyway. We want that soil where it should be, where our plants can grow. We can grow gardens in it. Another really important thing that mycorrhizal fungi can do is decontaminate soil. Okay, now here's another picture of these mycorrhizal fungi. They're growing through soil. All the white web-like things are the mycorrhizal fungi. Okay, now, if you have soil that is contaminated with heavy metals, like ours are up here, you have a choice. You can either very, very expensively remove that soil and take it somewhere else and bury it and try to keep those heavy metals contained and have them prevent them from leaching out. Or you can allow these mycorrhizal fungi to grow in the decontaminated area. There are specific species of mycorrhizal fungi that actually will actively seek out heavy metals in the soil, actively pull those heavy metals out of the soil and bring them into their material. And a lot of those fungi will then actually pass those up to the plant. And then in order to decontaminate the soil, all you have to do is wait for these fungi to do their jobs. You come along, you harvest the plants, and people can even smelt the plants and take the heavy metals back out and recycle them. It's pretty amazing. It's a lot cheaper and it requires a lot less maintenance. And you can do this for a lot of things, for extra nitrogen. Sometimes there's a lot of nitrogen in soil that's bad for plants from water. Sometimes there's extra phosphorus, same thing, bad for water. These fungi will take out that extra material. Okay, and then of course, mycorrhizal fungi help plants be healthy. Okay, when they're growing on these plant roots and they're passing nutrients from the soil to the plants generally tend to grow a lot better. Okay. So these mycorrhizal fungi have a number of benefits, and in general, they are pretty cheap to work with. And in fact, we are using them in our restoration projects here in this area for this specific reason, to bring benefits to the plants and to the water and to the soil. And here, right here, this is a picture of Irvine Ranch Conservancy and one of their restoration projects. And one of the things they do is if there aren't enough mycorrhizal fungi in the soil because the soil's been degraded or something like that, what they'll do is they'll take soil from a nice, intact, well-functioning, healthy ecosystem, collect some of that. It'll have the mycorrhizal fungi in that soil, and then they'll sprinkle some of it in the soil of the ecosystem they're trying to restore. And the mycorrhizal fungi will then colonize that new ecosystem from the fairy dust and help the native plants that these volunteers are planting grow a lot better. And so it actually is possible to really improve the health of these soils in the way that we want very cheaply. The only hitch is that we found in my lab that these mycorrhizal fungi need to be native species. They have to come from near the area that we're restoring, right? And that is likely because those mycorrhizal fungi are adapted to the conditions in that area. They're also adapted to living with the native plants there. They've been living with them for a long, long time. And so it makes sense that they would do better in that case. We have found, sometimes if you go to a nursery or like a home and garden store, you might find bags of what's called mycorrhizal fungi that you could put on your garden. Those generally don't work. Those have mycorrhizal fungi in it, but they're not native. They're not adapted to the conditions that you'd be growing your plants in, and they generally actually cause more harm to the plants than good. But that's fine for our purposes. It's actually a lot cheaper just to be able to collect that fairy dust from a nearby ecosystem. It's cheaper than having to buy the commercial mycorrhizal fungi. Okay, so I hope that I have explained to you why soils are so important, how they're connected with the health of our water, and then also how we have figured out ways that we can make sure our soils stay healthy in the future and relatively cheaply. And I think we all want that. We don't want our water bills to go up, but we want to be able to drink safe, healthy water. And it all comes back to looking at evidence and using science to answer these questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating. I learned a ton. Not only that I've been saying fungi incorrectly my whole life.
No, it's fine.
I've been calling it fungi.
Oh, that's good too.
That's the way I thought you said it.
It's good too. Sometimes I'll say fungi. I don't even pay attention.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't even know how to pronounce it. Like
Okay. Well, you're an expert. I'm going to take your lead on it.
Right.
That was so interesting. And I guess I didn't know that, if I'm working in the garden, or if I pull up a weed, or if I pull up a plant, I thought that all of the stuff that hangs off was root structure. And what I just learned from your presentation is that it's not. It's a combination of the root and the mycorrhizal fungi.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. And we've got a couple of questions in, but I have a question first. So I'm going to use a point of personal privilege to ask this question. What effects have you seen of climate change on how the mycorrhizal fungi is helping, or and maybe it's adapting? I don't know. How is climate change impacting this symbiotic relationship?
That's a really important question, and it's something that we've been studying a long time. And I'm actually pleased to have learned that in our studies, the mycorrhizal fungi can handle that climate change pretty well. Like around here, we're expecting climate change to cause more droughts, and we've been seeing signs of that. And mycorrhizal fungi can actually do pretty well under drought. And most importantly, when there are drought conditions, plants really, really rely on those mycorrhizal fungi. The mycorrhizal fungi help them take up water that they normally wouldn't be able to take up just by their roots. And so actually these mycorrhizal fungi, in addition to doing all the other services that I mentioned, they give these plants more resilience in the face of climate change. And that's always good news. And again, because they're pretty cheap and easy to handle. So it's a nice silver bullet.
Yeah, that's great. Some questions are coming in. I'm going to I'm not going to go in the order, because I see one that I think is really important, and kind of the point of this is one of the persons commented they didn't quite understand how the fungi are helpful for the water. So can you just reiterate that, maybe just in a couple of sentences?
Yeah. They basically serve like filters. It's like your Brita filters or the filters that are in your refrigerator. They filter out the water as it goes through the soil. The soil is a filter, to be sure, but these fungi are an extra filter. It's like a really, really high-tech filter. As the water is going through the soil, the fungi use all their little enzymes and physiology and mechanics to pull out individual molecules of pollution, like nitrogen, like lead, other heavy metals, right out of that water before it goes into your drinking water or into the ocean.
I would imagine that's especially important if you rely on a well, because
Yes.
you're tapping the groundwater that has filtered through, and you have to have a healthy soil system in order to make sure that your well water is clean.
You really, really do. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a question. I think I've read about fungi underground helping to create communication networks between root structures of plants and trees in a beneficial way. Can you further explain that?
Yeah. Yeah, they are correct. So we call that the wood wide web. And I'm sorry about that. I'm really sorry about that. They attach trees together in forests. And I don't know if you've seen Avatar, that movie. They have that. Like they have this like mycorrhizal network in Avatar. It's how the trees are all communicating with each other and how they communicate with the people. And I know it sounds far out, but basically if you have two trees that are growing side by side, they don't even need to be the same species or related at all. They'll have roots that are kind of near each other in the soil. You can have one mycorrhizal fungus that will attach to one root and then grow over and attach to the other root. And that fungus will actually pass nutrients back and forth between the trees. Wow. And it's pretty crazy. It sounds far-fetched, but we have so much evidence now that happens that we believe it. Yeah.
That is amazing.
I know.
And I didn't know exactly the mechanics of how that worked, but I had heard news stories about trees communicating, and it just really,
Oh.
it really makes you stop and think. There's so much we don't know. There's so much we don't know, even though there's a lot that we do know, but it really just makes you stop and think, how we should treasure all of these species. The least among us of the species, from sort of an animal sort of centered hierarchy. Here's another question. How does cloud seeding affect these little guys?
Oh, interesting. I don't think it will have, I don't think it has like a direct effect on them. But if there's more rain or less rain, then that does affect how they grow. That's for sure. But I don't really know too many studies that have looked at that. That's a good question.
Okay. Okay. We'll leave it open for just a couple more minutes, and I'll try to ask a couple of questions. I try not to make these go more 45 minutes because a lot of people work and they're on calls all day, and so the last thing I want is for them to be on another call for while they're trying to put their kids down or whatever. So let me ask you a question. I was fascinated by the opportunity to use these fungi to take out the heavy metals and then actually recycle those metals, like smelt them and recycle them. Is that happening anywhere? Is that a way that places are being, like EPA sites are being cleaned up or anything like that?
Yeah.
Where is that happening?
In New Jersey, in New Jersey, there are some Superfund sites that are really, really degraded and with a lot of heavy metals. And that was actually where this technique was kind of applied for this purpose. It turns out there was a town right near the Superfund site, and these researchers went to this neighborhood and just started knocking on people's doors and said, can we come in and sample your backyard and plant these plants that we think might be important? And they said, okay. And so you have these pictures of people in these bunny suits that are like protective gear in these people's backyards because the heavy metal was so high in the soil. And so then what the researchers did was they tested all these different plant species in combination with all these different mycorrhizal species. And they actually just found through trial and error which combinations of plant and mycorrhizal fungi were really useful. And they actually got numbers like, they have estimates of how much lead and mercury you can pull back out of the soil with each crop. And it actually ends up being pretty cost effective if you can sell the recycled metals.
Yeah. That's great. Here's another question. What can we do to keep our soils healthy at an individual level and also at a higher level or a policy level?
Thank you. So at an individual level, I always recommend, as I recommend this to my students I teach, if you can plant native species in your yard. There's a lot of good reasons for it. First of all, they're beautiful. And second, they're already adapted to our conditions. So they don't need a lot of water. So if we're having a drought year, you'll save a lot of, water fees. They don't need a lot of nitrogen. You don't have to add a lot of fertilizer. They are able to fight off pathogens and bugs pretty well. So you don't need to add a lot of herbicides. And those are all things that, the herbicides, the fertilizer, adding excess water, those can all prevent your soil from being healthy. So that is the first step. And the second thing is that, if you have native plants growing in your yard, over time, they'll cultivate native mycorrhizal fungi that will do all these other things for you too. And so it might take a little while, it might take a few seasons, but the plants will find those fungi, and then you'll have a nice, stable yard that will be beautiful. And if you go online, there's this website called Calscape, like landscape, but instead of land, you say Calscape. And you can click off like what you want your garden to look like. Do you want to have butterflies in your garden? Then you click you want butterflies. If you want like a hedge or something like that, you click you want a hedge. And you fill in all your what you want. And then this database will find what native plants you should plant that have those characteristics that are native to your particular area. And it will also give you the address of the nearest nursery that has those plants. And so it's pretty easy to do.
That's fantastic. I'm going to do
know.
that. It's Calscape,
Calscape.
CALSCAPE.com.
.org.
.org. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to push that out to folks. The last question, I'm just going to answer very briefly, and I'm going to have to get back to the questioner because I don't know. I don't know specifically the answer, but the question is, are San Marcos developers damaging our soil? There are developers in the area, actually in Escondido, that have actually been indicted for polluting, and they have gone to jail. So they have also donated to the incumbent who sits on the Vallecitos Water Board currently. So I don't know if they are necessarily damaging the soil, and I don't know if that's in San Marcos. I know that it happened in Escondido, but I can get back to you about that. I know who the questioner is, so I can get back to you. I am so happy that you joined me. I'm very grateful. This was fascinating. I learned so much that I didn't know, and it just really makes you think. We really need people in office who care about the environment, who understand science.
I agree with you.
Right. And are committed to understanding complex issues and how things are interrelated, not sort of siloing things and thinking that if one thing doesn't necessarily impact them or their community or their plot of land, that they should not pay attention to it. I think having an understanding of the interconnectedness and an ability to think about complex things and think creatively is really important when we're talking about resources that are scarce, like water, and solving really hard problems that if we could solve, we would be in a better place as a planet and as a people. So I'm going to thank you again. And if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that you shared your expertise with us tonight. It was so fascinating. And I have some homework. I'm going to make sure that I design my yard using native species. And I will also make a plug for the Vallecitos the website, because they also have several outreach programs. And I think they do an award every year for native species landscaping. And I think that's wonderful. I wish they promoted it more. Maybe I will promote it more when I get on the board, because I think that is something that we can all do. And it's fun, and it's a way to beautify our surroundings. And now that we know what's going on below the surface, it's a way to keep our planet healthy and our water clean. So
there's no doubt to it. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. It was fun to talk to you.
Thank you. Great to talk to you too. Thank you everyone for joining. We will see you next week, Wednesday, 8 p.m. I don't know exactly what the content is going to be just yet, but I'll figure it out and then I'll tell you. So look for the ads, and we will see you. Next week. Stay safe. Wear a mask. We're not through COVID-19 just yet. We're getting better, but keep your distance. Again, if you want to host a street and greet, if you are in District 5, please reach out to me and I will coordinate with you, and we will we'll have a good time. They're fun. It's really nice to talk to voters, and I'm enjoying that. So good night. Thank you again. And